Hey everybody, St. Paul here, and welcome to episode 38 of Music on the Run. And this is a really cool episode. One of my dearest friends on the planet, Oliver Leiber, is next on Music on the Run.
Before we get started here, do me a favor. Wherever you got this podcast, make sure you subscribe, give us a rating, and if you have time and like what you're hearing, make sure you write a review. It really helps us get the word out so we can have a lot more people coming to the party.
Hey everybody, I'm St. Paul Peterson. Prince gave me that nickname, and I've been lucky enough to tour with people like the Steve Miller Band, Kenny Loggins, Peter Frampton, Donny Osmond, to name a few. And when I'm not playing music, I love to run. And this is a podcast about how we stay healthy on the road, physically, mentally, and with our families. Welcome to Music on the Run. Hey everybody, St. Paul here. Welcome to episode 38 of Music on the Run. All right, confession time. I took 3 weeks off of running. Yeah, but I'm back on, and it feels great. I ran 4 miles today, and, do yourself a favor. Make sure you take some time out for yourself. Go get moving. You'll feel so much better for doing it. Anyway, I'm back on. I figure the guy who has a podcast about running should probably practice what he preaches. But anyway, my next guest is an incredible songwriter, producer, guitar player, drummer, among many other things. He's had incredible success writing and producing for people like Paula, Abdul, the Corrs, Aretha Franklin, to name a few. He happens to be one of my dearest buddies on the planet. Please welcome Oliver Leiber. There he is. Hey, we've done this before in the very room that you're in over there. We did this when you and I did an F Deluxe record. Isn't that right?
Yep. Yeah, I remember.
That was so much fun.
Man, how long ago was that now? A couple of years? 3 years? 4 years?
Probably more than that.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah. Okay.
You don't do a lot of these interviews, so I want to say thank you, first of all, for taking the time out to do this.
I need to clear the air with you about something. Because what number did you say this was?
38.
38, yeah. So it took you 38 to call me to get to the bottom of the barrel and the end of your Rolodex.
Check please. Check please.
Yeah, okay.
No, that's not true. You're not at the bottom. Now, how will you feel when it goes to 8,000 episodes? Because
right.
Then
and you circle back, you mean? And you circle back?
Then we'll circle back again and tell our story, because we'll be 85, still producing records together and all that. I was just out there. We were hanging in the very room that you're in right now, and we were doing yet another record. It seems like you and I, we have been producing and writing records together for, do we even say the 40 word? Almost 40 years.
Is it? I mean, 86,
6, something
85?
like that. Yeah, so let's not say 40 yet. That's coming.
Okay. Yeah.
That's coming.
Yeah.
You've been in every record I've been on or involved in since I left Prince, I think. Every solo record or group record.
Yeah.
You just keep coming back for more punishment, don't you?
Yeah. Well, the pay's horrible. The
How
hours
much you getting paid for this interview,
grueling.
too, by the way?
The company is
not so good.
Not so good. Never smells good in the room. So, how can I stay away?
Oh, I know. Yeah, you want to, for those of you listening to this is like hanging out with my brother.
Should we start again?
No,
okay.
I think this is the charm of this interview, and I hope it continues down this dismal path.
Yeah.
I've known Oliver for a very, very long time, and it's been such a great hang. And we keep coming back for more. Sometimes we make a bunch of money, sometimes we lose money, and the running joke is, how much money is this interview going to cost me? And I think that's what you said, right?
Right.
Yeah.
But the truth is I do it because I love working with you, and you're one of the most talented musicians and writers and producers in your own right that I know. And it's always fun and it's always feeds me musically. So, and we're so aligned. I mean, our influences and where we come from are just so aligned that there's that, I think that's where you get writing teams and great producing teams and bands where there's just a telepathy and just a chemistry. So I've always, felt that with you from the first time we were stuck in a room together and someone said, you guys should know each other. And, off we went. And the result of that right out of the bat, right, was...
For sure.
Right.
I want to know what you've been doing. Okay, right before COVID hit, you finished a pretty incredible record for Quinn Sullivan. Tell me a little bit about that record that just came out.
Yeah, well, so we had been, I had been introduced to Quinn. I think it came through Dave Wolf, Beth Hart's manager, another amazing singer-songwriter who I've had the pleasure of working with in the past. And she's on Mascot Records, which is a small label out of the Netherlands. And Dave Wolf, Quinn is on that label. And Dave Wolf essentially made the introduction when they sort of put it out there that they were looking for someone. They had this really talented guitar player who'd been sort of under Buddy Guy's wing for years and years, ever since he was, 5 or 6, or, there's videos out there of him playing with Buddy Guy and all these other blues legends as a, tiny kid. The guitar's bigger than him. There's plenty of YouTube stuff on Quinn. But the message I got was sort of, what do you think of him? What do you think of his voice? What do you think beyond just being a blues phenom? Like, do you see something there? Is he an artist? Is he, they were sort of, that label hadn't really dealt with a lot of singer-songwriter type artists, John Mayer type artists, for lack of a better comparison. But they were essentially coming to me saying, will you get in the studio with him? Will you just write, so just see what it's like and just give us some feedback, like, what do we have here? And he flew out from Boston with his dad, and we sat here, and he played me a snippet of an idea off his iPhone, and it was just off and running. And it was very easy to write, with the song sort of wrote itself in a day or so, and which ended up on the record, a song called She's Gone. And it kind of went from there, and the record company liked, what they heard, and were really surprised by the change of direction, from what they had come to expect from him. And that started the process of about 1.5 years of writing. And he would, in between tour, come, and we'd spend anywhere from 3 to 5 days, eventually wrote this album, So I had cut the basics before the pandemic hit. He came out here and had, you played on it, but, bunch of great drummers, Abe and Aaron Sterling and David Goodstein, and guitar players, and, just a bunch of great players. And I cut the basics, and then the pandemic hit. But I had enough raw material that I could sit here and do, kind of my thing anyway, which is to, sort of go in deep and start, comping and doing all that stuff, doing my own overdubs as I saw fit, and trying to fill in the holes, sending you files, sending other people files to try and complete the production. So it was kind of great because I had a lot of time and a lot of quiet and a lot of space in order to really focus in on honing the productions and refining the record. That took me about 6 months into the pandemic, and then I really finished that. Joe Zook mixed the record and did an amazing job. Sure, another really talented guy. Yeah, and so that was kind of what I was into and what I finished coming into this pandemic, and then had absolutely nothing to do after that, and have been curling up chords.
You've been curling chords, throwing things away, organizing.
I was making sure all the faders are Unity Gang. No, actually, it's been kind of great because I've been able to get to some of the stuff that you just generally never have time to do, or the inclination, because you're too busy and you're working.
And you're a dad. Hello.
And I am a dad. I'm a single dad, and I have the kids half time, and so yeah, every other week it's like I drop everything, and it's I'm making waffles, and I'm a Uber cab and an ATM machine, and everything in between.
You're a couple of years behind me on that one, and you get to see the future of what it's going to be like to have adult children and the problems and the fun that go along with that. And then I get to see you deal with what I dealt with about 10 years ago. And welcome to the hang there, brother man.
Thank you. Yeah, I was a late bloomer, and now I get it, because I'm like, ancient, and I'm dealing with a 12-year-old and a 15-year-old. And it's like, okay, I get why people have kids,
Your girls are the most beautiful young ladies, and I just adore them. I'm their Uncle Paul.
You're their Uncle Paul and their godfather.
That's right.
So
I
get
love
ready.
those babies.
Get ready.
So you've been an honorary Peterson for about, 35 years, I guess. Not quite 40.
Not quite 40.
We all love you, of course, all the Peterson family. We met you when you were in 20s, and we'll get to how our relationship later. But let's go back to New York City. First of all, explain. We have to tell the listeners and viewers about your musical family. Will you explain who your pops is?
Yeah. Well, my dad, he passed away, like 7 years ago or so. But my dad was half of a songwriting team, Leiber and Stoller. He was the lyricist, and they, just a songwriting team that really sort of were at the very, very early stages of rock and roll.
Give us some names. Do you mind dropping some names of who your dad worked with?
God, so many people. Elvis Presley, the Coasters. Oh my God, my head was like, you got to just pull it up.
That's good enough. That's all we need. Those are some pretty big names.
Some classic stuff, some Hound Dog, Jailhouse Rock, Stand By Me, on Broadway, Kansas City. Just, a lot of the stuff that was staples for the next generation that followed them, which was Lennon, McCartney, and a bunch of other teams that came. But they were very early writing, and they were the first independent producers, actually, which is, I don't know how interesting a fact that is, but up until Leiber and Stoller, producers were sort of assigned to a record label. They were the in-house producers, much the way I think George Martin was still in England when he met the Beatles. He was with EMI, was it? And he was a staff producer. I could be getting this all wrong. People will correct you, I'm sure. Or correct me.
I hope so.
But they were the first guys to say, no, we're not signing anyone. We'll produce for Atlantic, we'll produce for Warner's, we'll produce, independent producers, writer producers. So anyway, I grew up with some pretty interesting people, coming through the house. Phil Spector used to walk our dog.
Now, Phil worked for your father.
Yeah. Leiber and Stoller gave him his start, and there were also a lot of writing teams that worked under. They were so successful for a period of time and had so much work. There was this 8 to 10 year period where they were doing everything. They had so much that they couldn't possibly write all the material for these records, and they started to sign writing teams, Carole King, Goffin and King, Cynthia Weil, and Barry Mann. I'm going to forget, a dozen of them.
Was the Brill building?
Sorry?
Was this the Brill building?
This is the Brill building. So this was, they were in the Brill building. They were up on the, up there on the penthouse, and they signed all these writing teams, and literally there was, a hallway. And I sort of remember the tail end of this because I was younger and things started to change by the time I was, 10 or 11, things were shifting. But I do remember rooms, with pianos in them, and, there were songwriting teams in there writing songs for records. And that's who my dad was. And that's kind of how I got into it. He was all about work. My brother is also a great musician, Jed. And if we wanted to spend time with my dad, when we were younger, you pretty much had to get dropped off at the studio. And I'd get plunked in front of the couches, in front of the console. Sure. And it was just like, shh, be quiet, I'm going to hang out. And I watch these amazing session players cutting tracks and cutting records and just sort of absorbing and, soaking in the process.
It's just what your dad did. And you wanted to see him and you're hanging out and you're getting all this music coming and thrown at you. You pretty much got that all through osmosis. Of course, your natural ability, but.
Yeah, but, and I also think it really affected the kind of player that I became, both as a drummer and as a guitar player, which was, what I saw, and I think my dad talked about this too, was guys that came in and played incredibly well together, but tight as a rhythm section. And I saw guys that came in and, after grooving for a minute with the rhythm, found their part. And it was just like, and I remember the first time I watched a record, I think it was with Marlo Henderson. He's a great guitar player. And it was this groove and these changes, and I could have even been James Gatson playing drums. But he played one note, and it went through the changes. And it was the first time I'd heard someone grab a common tone, and as a guitar player, and play through. And honestly, my mind just went like, it was so funky and so in the pocket. It was and everyone was playing the changes, and he was staying on that note. And that's the kind of stuff that appealed to me. I don't know how else to say it. There was a simplicity and a soulfulness. And I think, in my playing, I've never sought to be a ripping kind of player, or a chopsy player. I've always wanted to be a pocket player and be a guy that found parts and played in a section.
So the stage was set. Here you are. You're a kid. Your father and his partner are making some of the most classic black music,
right?
Which is interesting in itself.
Sorry, say that again.
I just said that's interesting in itself. Here are the couple of white dudes who are making the most influential black music,
right?
And that must have been absorbed into you as a kid. Your love for soul and your love for funk and your love for everything must have come partially through those experiences that you were witnessing.
Very much, because first of all, my dad could not use any of the sort of, by the time I was 11, 12, whatever, we're talking now 72, 73, 74, and there's what we now call classic rock, and that it's he could not use any of that, he didn't want to hear it. It didn't move him. It never did. And from a very early age, the records that were in our house, apart from all of his, Coasters and, and Drifters and, Willamette, Big Mama Thornton. And it was all, the Three Kings, BB, Albert, Freddie.
Wow.
It was Ray Charles, all that stuff. That was all the records that we had. And that's, when he talked about music and when he got excited and he would talk about singers, it was always black, blues, or R&B singers. That's all he cared about. That's all that moved him. And that's all that he ever really wanted to do. It happened before I was born, the rhythm, look, they were called race records back then, the records that they were making. And they were recording initially very small regional artists in the South, blues records and things like that. The original Hound Dog was Big Mama Thornton, Willamette Thornton, Presley heard Hound Dog because it was being played by a cover band in a Las Vegas lounge.
No.
I mean, he got the song third hand or something.
I didn't know that story.
But Leiber and Stoller were interested in making those records with those artists, black artists, and all of the early stuff they did in the early 50s and for the first 7, 8 years, whatever. That's what that's what that was. Yeah, I mean, and that comes from his growing up in Baltimore and growing up in a ghetto that was really Black Jewish ghetto where they were all living together or on top, or I don't know if it was separated by some railroad tracks, or, I've got various stories that aren't completely clear to me, but that's where he came from. And that culture, that's all that ever moved him, musically and culturally.
Interesting.
So yeah, I inherited that. By the time I came around, right, he was in New York and we were living on the Upper West Side, which is certainly, a different background than he grew up with. But what was weird is when I stepped through the, front door, of our apartment, culturally, and what I got from him was who he was and what he was interested in. And it had very little to do with what my life was like and what my exposures were like when I stepped out of that door, And frankly, musically, I was kind of like dipping into stuff that was 10 and 15 years older, because it was like all of his early records. So
right.
I was kind of getting both then. So I was getting the Stones and the Beatles and Led Zeppelin and Bad Company as we move on. But it was all mixed with all of that blues and R&B that, I had grown up on. So those were kind of my influences,
What an incredible advantage for someone like you and someone like me, because my mom did the same thing for me. I had all the big band swing era things happening for me. And not only did I love Stevie, but I loved all the stuff that my mom was playing at the time. And here you are, a kid coming up, and you're sitting witnessing these sessions, and you have all the history of your dad and his partner. But yet you're a kid and you're like, no, wait a minute. I want to do my own thing. Now,
Totally.
So you went off on your own while you were in New York. So what are you doing when you're a teenager? You got to be playing out and everything, right?
Yeah. So I had a band in high school. Well, I remember the first time, I think I was 8 and I was at camp. I played the drums. I started as a drummer and I was playing the drums. My brother played keyboards and he had this like Farfisa. It was the Gibson version of the Farfisa. It wasn't even the Farfisa. And we went away to summer camp. I was 10, he was 11. I don't know why I'm telling this story. I'm telling the story because it was the first time there was a talent show and we decided we would play for the talent show. And I set up my drums, had a little Ringo kit. I had the, little 3-piece Ludwig Ringo kit, but the student version, the standard, not the big boy kit that I eventually got. But, and we played some 3-chord jam, something pretty simple. We probably went on for 15 minutes. It probably started at one tempo and ended at another.
I hope so. Yeah, ended at a different one.
But afterwards, what I remember, because all the girls from the girls' side of the camp were on one side and all the guys were on the other. And I just remember after playing and getting off stage, all these girls coming up to me. And, and that was really, like all this talk about influences and, let's be real. It was like
get to the real deal here.
I had found my superpower, and it was drums and it was rock and roll. We started a band in high school. We played all the local dances around Manhattan, mostly the private school circuit.
Got it.
Right. And that was really sort of, that would have been 7th, 8th, 9th, 10th grade, until I was getting in so much trouble that I just got sent out of New York to a little working farm.
Oh, do tell.
Yeah.
Do tell. Give me the short version of where you went to finish your high school years.
Well, as surprising as this may seem to people out there, I had a slight wild side to me, little bit of edge, had a proclivity for getting myself in situations, doing things that were, in retrospect, probably not the healthiest, probably not the best choices. But anyway, I was running amok as a teen in New York. And at a certain point, it was at the end of my sophomore year, my dad was like, somebody told him about this school in Vermont, and they had like 85 milking cows, and I would be isolated and I couldn't get off the hill. And I would just, and that sounded great to him.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye. Off I went. And I was very pissed off. I remember hitting a wall, like, in my first 2 weeks. I hit a wall, shattered my hand. So not only was I stuck in Vermont at a school that I ended up loving, by the way. It ended up being an amazing experience, but it took a minute. But anyways, cast on my hand, first several months of being at this school. I wasn't a morning person. I was assigned morning barn, which you wake up with your little team at 5 a.m. in order to walk like a mile to the barn to shovel cow shit, before first period class. And I often didn't wake up, surprise, surprise, and I would get freezing cold Vermont stream water, like barely, like frozen at the top, but not so much that they couldn't break the surface and get, a bucket full of water poured on me, on my bed, wake up swinging.
Morning.
Good morning. So anyway, I ended up, last 2 years of high school at that school where honestly, I didn't get to do, I wasn't playing in bands. There was one other kid there my last year. I was a senior and this kid shows up, this freshman, and he was walking around like, Vermont in the woods, but he had this Les Paul strung really low. He would be walking around outside and he had these headphones that plugged into the guitar that I guess gave you like an amp sound.
Sure.
So he was walking around with his Les Paul, and then I just thought, like, who is this fucking guy? And we got to know each other, and we ended up playing a lot of guitar together. And he ended up, his name was Reb. His real name was Rebel. And I thought, oh my God, is that even a real name?
Yeah.
His name was Rebel Beach. And people might know Reb Beach went on to play for big bands. I think eventually, I'm going to forget it now. All right, you can go look it up. Reb Beach.
I'm looking for you. Hold on.
Later he filled in, he played for Whitesnake, but before that, it's Winger.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, the band that Beavis and Butthead effectively ended in one comment on one episode, I think.
Oh, no.
But yeah, and he's
Winger and Whitesnake is what I see here.
Yeah.
Okay.
Amazing rock guitar player, and kind of like a pioneer in a way. I mean, really sort of brought a lot to the table in the 80s with the way he played. But anyway, that was him. So we were the only two musicians out of 200 on this little hill in Vermont, and thank God for him. So Reb, if you're out there, thanks for being there.
And then you went on to college, right? So are you playing music in college at all?
Yeah. I had several bands at college, but I finally, that I played in, and I put one together, and I was playing drums in that. I was playing guitar in that band. So I played drums in some bands in college, and then put one together with my buddy Squire Mahoney, and called The Unnatural Act. We had a fairly kick-ass band for when you consider that it was sort of like East Coast, kind of like Ivy League school, and not normally a hotbed for like R&B musicians and stuff like but managed to like find these guys, and we had a really good band and we had a lot of fun. So I played all the way through college, although I left with a semester to go because my recreational activities sort of got in the way of my schoolwork. And I took, the theme continues, right?
Okay.
And I took that spring off. I went to New York. I ended up playing drums for one of the Village People, the construction worker, David Hodo. Put a band together for him. My brother played in it. The bass player, a bass player from college who had graduated the year before, George Weiss, another great musician. Anyway, sax player Steve Ellis, who ended up to go on to play for Bowie for years and years. Anyway, and played for David Hodo. I lasted about 3 months, and my addictions got really severe, and I was unable to really function. And long story short, by July 20th, that summer of '83, I was on a plane headed to Minnesota, of all places.
That must have made you happy. We're going to take a little break from the interview right now because I want to tell you about a couple of really cool things. First of all, we're having so much fun with our weekly 1-minute funk jams called Funk Friday. We've had so many world-class musicians on Funk Friday, including members of the Steve Miller Band, Fleetwood Mac, Daryl Hall and John Oates, Earth, Wind & Fire, just to name a few. You can check that out on all of our social media, but you can also see it on our YouTube channel. I also want to take this opportunity to thank all of our members who have supported us on Patreon. Don't know what Patreon is? Go to www.patreon.com/Music on the Run podcast, and there you'll get all sorts of information on how you can financially help us produce this podcast. There are all kinds of incentives listed there on the website, and there are many different levels on how you can become involved. We could not put on this podcast without our patrons. All right, let's get back to the interview. That must have made you happy.
Yeah, to go to gym. Well, the only thing I knew about Minnesota was at this point in time in the '80s, and at school, starting at, I think it was either 1 or 1:30 in the morning, Mary Tyler Moore came on. And they had back-to-back Mary. It was like one and then the other. So it was like from 1 to 2 or whatever. It was Mary Tyler Moore. And in the beginning, she throws her hat up in the air. Mm-hmm. And they have this sign that says Minneapolis, St. Paul.
Yep.
That's the only thing. It's the only time that ever entered my consciousness. And quite honestly, I was so out of it at that point in my life that I didn't know if Minneapolis was the state or Minnesota was none of it was really clear to me. It was like, that's the only time I heard Minneapolis, St. Paul. I saw it, and because I was up, because I was,
having
I had
fun.
important things to do at 1:30 in the morning.
Oh yeah.
And I was on a plane headed there to treatment. That sort of leads us into, in a way, like how you and I ever came to meet, how I ever came to be in the Midwest in St. Paul, at that point in my life, which was really left turn.
We did a concert 3 years ago in Australia, and you told a little bit about this story. Going to Minnesota, you didn't want to be there. You didn't know who was like the ends of the earth.
Yeah.
Minnesota was, in your opinion, at that point in time, which I'm sure it was. It's like, here you are, you have to go, you're sobering up, you're changing your life so you can actually function again.
Well, I was planning on being back in New York. I had important things to do. We had gotten on Star Search. We'd been accepted to Star Search, the David Hodo band. We had done our recordings for it, and we had done our audition. And, I had things to do. I was a busy guy in my mind, and I had important things to do. And I was going to knock out this treatment thing and get back to real life. And, where music was really happening, which in my mind was in New York City, at the time.
And you happened to come to Minneapolis at an incredible time, actually. And this was right before Prince.
This was July. So the morning I woke up in Minneapolis was July 21st, 1983, which was the first morning I ever woke up, sober, right? And that's my sober day. That's the last time. The plane ride over, I had some really bad Paul Masson wine. It was like a little screw up top, and it was like that. It was just a bad way to go out. You know what I mean? It's not the way you want to go out. But anyway, so Minnesota in very real ways. It would mark, I woke up July 21st, 1983, and that was the beginning of a whole new chapter in my life. I didn't realize what lay ahead for me,
And I met you around 80. Yeah, well, you would, before I talk about when we met, you were there from 83. you were working in St. Paul, doing more of your rehab things, but you were playing. You were motivated to play at that point in time, right?
It took me about I went to rehab. It was like 30 something days, and then they told me they really recommended that I didn't go right back to New York right away. People, places, and things where I had gotten in a lot of trouble, and they said we really recommend you go to a halfway house. Right. And at that point, one of the parts of the program, the 12-step program, is turning your will and your life over to a higher power. And at that point in my life, not being a religious guy and not believing in Judeo-Christian God, and I don't, believe in, I have my own version of spirituality. The recommendations of sober counselors and people in a rehab, that was my higher power. And I sort of went, well, if this group of people, who are sober and are trying to help me in my life are recommending that I don't go back and I go to a halfway house, I'm turning my will and my life over to to them. And right. So I went to a halfway house in St. Paul, right near the Schmitz Brewery. I mean, it was classic. It was like in this funky part of town near the Schmitz Brewery, and it was huge, neon sign the size of like a Broadway billboard. But of course, like some of the letters were burnt out.
Oh, yeah.
So I don't know what you saw. It was like, but it was a low point in my life, so I thought. And I spent 6 months there. And, when you go to a halfway house, they want you to get a job. They want you to but they don't want you, if you were a lawyer or you were a doctor, they don't want you going back into your profession. They actually want you to go into work that's humbling, because one of the things apparently that we need as addicts and alcoholics is some humility.
Got it.
Not the most humble bunch. So not that I had that kind of profession anyway. And so I ended up doing garden work. I mean, hoeing leaves, not, raking leaves and stuff. Busboying, waiting tables, eventually becoming like a short order chef, stuff like that, for my whole time that I was there, 6 months. Once again, at the end of the 6 months, they recommended that I don't go back to New York. And I spent a year living somewhere with maybe some of the sober guys that I had been in the halfway house with.
Right.
Turned my will and my life over to them at that point, said, okay, I'll do that. And went to live, up on Summit Avenue in St. Paul, and with all those other guys, 5 other guys in this Victorian house. Each had a little room and shared the kitchen, and all working like odd jobs and just trying to stay sober and try to, get on track. It really was like a year or a year and a half before I could even get up the courage to sit in anywhere. And that's how it started. There was that little club on Dale, Sweeney's
Champagne Bar. Yeah.
And I would pass it all the time going to the restaurant where I was waiting tables or bussing at first. And I would pass it. And I remember seeing in the window, it was like Monday night, jam night. And I just was way too nervous at that point in my life. I couldn't get high. I couldn't get dry. I couldn't take the edge off.
Right.
I hadn't played. I didn't come out to Minnesota with my instruments or a drum kit or a guitar. I had nothing. I had been doing nothing but program and trying to get my life together for well over a year. I asked the guys in the house. There was one night I was like, I got to do it. It's the dead of winter, and there was jam night. I was like on Monday, and Jose Jane. Well, the first few times I dragged him out there, cold Minnesota winter, and we sat all night. And and the guy would say, "Is anybody else want to sit in?" It's like the end of last call, and I've been sitting there all night, and my friends have been sitting there with me, and I couldn't raise my hand. And I think like this second, maybe third time I dragged him out, they were like, "Motherfucker, if you don't raise your hand like this time, I'm never coming out here with I'm not coming out again." It's like we just sat through all night, and it's like, and they called me up. I can't remember the guy's name, but it was like a little R&B band, Okay. I can't even remember it because having an outer body experience, I literally was just fucking nervous, and I don't know, my hands and my feet did something. They got me through to the end.
Yep.
And at the end of that, the guy asked me for my number and said, "Hey, I got this little gig, and I think it was, what was the supper club?
Ruby's Cabaret.
No. There was a different supper club. Oh, I can't think of it now.
Yeah.
But anyway, he said, I got this little gig, this like casual coming up in a week. Would you like to play it? And I was like, he took my number, and that I played that gig. And I think I started to hear about some of the other bands in town. And I went, and I remember seeing the TC Jammers.
Sure.
And Bobby Vandell was playing drums. And he's another sort of like local Minneapolis legend, musical legend.
Sure is.
And God bless you, Bobby Vandell. Like I remember he got off stage and that band was smoking, and that was one of my experiences where I went out and I just thought like, fuck, there are some great players, some funky, soulful, great. Melanie Rosales was singing her ass off. And I mean, I can't remember the whole band, but maybe Behringer was playing guitar, John De La Selva, whatever.
Sheer could have been.
Your brother was playing?
Probably.
It was just a killer band. And I remember kind of getting up the nerve to come up to Bobby Vandell in, halfway, when it came off stage for a break. And I did this like, man, like, I love your drumming, and I hear like this Steve Gadlick here, and I hear this there, and I just started talking shop with him, and but I was like a puppy, man, and I was like, I'm from New York City, I just landed here, I'm a drummer, and I'm just felt like I'm blown away. Well, I don't know what I said, once again, and he said, like, come back out, sometime, come out again, man, you should sit in, and I think I'd only sat in once with that other, that first experience and played that gig. I hadn't done a whole lot. And I remember the next time I went out to see him, he had me come sit in. And after that, he took my number. I'm not sure when it happened, whether it was a Doug Maynard gig or something, but he asked me to fill in for him for a gig he couldn't do. And I filled in, I think it was Doug Maynard, and obviously it went well enough that I got calls periodically to sub for him, man. He was so generous of spirit. And so I guess it was one of those times in my life that were I so needed somebody to help me out. And, he was there for me.
Good man.
Really helped me get my start and my confidence in myself and a belief in myself. And, and eventually Gordy did the same for me, asked me to fill in a few gigs. And these guys just sort of brought me up, and I ended up playing around town. I ended up trying out for, I played in a rock cover band called Heroes with my buddy Ken Zimmich. And that was all like more like Van Halen and Billy Idol and all rock, a whole different, playing like bowling alleys and whole different kind of club scene. And then went from that to playing in a band called Bittersweet, which was all, whole other thing. It was much more R&B funk. Bass player was Rocky Garrity, who he was really, if you're listening to those tracks from Purple Rain in the time, that's Rocky playing bass and singing the harmony above on the Bird.
Oh, yeah.
And playing his ass off and playing that stuff. And God rest his soul. Another guy who had, had his demons. But, man, he was funky. I mean, and a killer drummer. Ended up playing drums for Jesse Johnson, a few years after that. And that's where, that we were playing way more funk and R&B in that band. That's kind of was my introduction into that part of the Minneapolis music scene. Troy Williams was in that band. I remember when Rocky left, Sonny T played bass.
Funky
came and played bass. And I remember whatever, I can go off on a bunch of side tangents and stories. I remember the first time Sonny came and subbed, Rocky couldn't make it, and I had never heard of Sonny Thompson, and Troy was like, man, this guy's coming to, he's showing up to play, and he's like, this is the guy that like taught Prince a lot of what he knows as a guitar player and a bass player. And, you know, this guy's legend, you know, showed up, no gig bag, bass, like, you know, bass over his shoulder and a 6-pack, and plugged in, hadn't rehearsed, you know, and whatever, and just killed it. Killed it. He was like, Sonny Thompson was something else, man.
And he's still ridiculous. We just
and still ridiculous
with him last week.
This is a whole
I think it's
trip.
important, but I think we can fast forward to you and I hooking up.
Yeah.
Because I was at that point in time, I was deep in the Prince camp.
Yeah.
And these guys know my story, so I'm not going to get into it, but I was in the time and probably the family, and I was just leaving Prince. And I think I had written my entire record, and my brother Ricky produced it, and they weren't sold on having the first single for the record. And I don't know exactly how you and I came to meet. Maybe you do. Maybe you should fill me in.
This is what I remember. So what I remember is you guys, I had come out to see you play, in the club at Felty's for the first time.
Ouch. Yes.
I think you were sitting in with your brother's band Samoa.
Yep.
Or you were with Players. I think Players was a little later. I don't know.
Tiny bit later. Not much.
But man, I mean, I remember, you know, it was like, you know, this like good looking, you know, coiffed white kid, you know, like, playing like guitar on one song and bass on another song and singing. I was like, I hate this motherfucker. You know, because I had fancied myself like, you know, I play drums, I play guitar, and I'm, you know, and it was like, I just thought like, wow, you know, and he's a good looking kid. And, you know, I just remember being really impressed with you. And, but we didn't really know each other at that point. I just, you know, I came out and watched you play, and I knew who you were. And I knew that you right at that time were being groomed by Prince.
Right.
To be the lead singer in this, in the family. I knew you had taken over one of the keyboard chairs for Jimmy Jam in the time. And, but that was it. You know, I knew your brother, and I knew who you were. A guy named Dan Brennan, who was a local kind of guy who was starting to manage people at the time. You know, he knew of me, maybe through Doug Maynard. He knew of you, and I don't know how you knew, but he was the one that sort of went, these two guys should know each other, you know, whatever. They're both, you know, funky white kids, I guess. I don't know what his thinking was, right?
Sure.
At that time, I was playing, Jesse Johnson had seen me play with Alexander O'Neill at First Avenue. And Jesse had called me like the day after, a couple days after. I was playing guitar with Alexander.
Got it.
And he said, I'm putting this band together. He had already left the time at that point. He said, I'm putting this band together, and I want to know if you want to come audition as the guitar player. And that was Tamara in the Scene.
Margaret
that
Cox,
he had gotten signed to A&M, John McClain.
Right.
And so I think Dan knew me from that context, maybe, as playing guitar with Alexander O'Neill. That's how I knew Dan. He was on the road with us, managing Alexander. I had done Alexander's first tour as a guitar player. He just, for some reason, thought you and I should get in the studio. And and there's that little studio owned by the Brojos.
The Brojos, yes.
And I don't know what the context was. I think it was just to see if we could write a song or something, you know? He was trying to...
I was looking for my first single, and Dan said, I believe this is how it went down. Dan said, I got this co-writer you should really check out. He's new in town, and we got together, and if memory serves me, we knocked that thing out of the park. It was exactly what my record company was looking for.
Yeah.
And your lyric on that, with the exception of my third verse that we all love so much, it became my first single.
I'm taking the fifth.
Pleading the fifth on that, yeah. So anyway, Oliver and I, that's where we hooked up and we became fast friends. Yes, that became my first single by the name of Rich Man. And then we continued our friendship and our writing friendship. And I was on my way to LA to go make a video for this song called Rich Man. I had, back in those days, they were spending...
Well, we had Yeah. Well, we had, so right after that we did that, several weeks or months, my sense of like how long, but it wasn't, we had connected, and it wasn't long after that I had written a song and I wanted to do the demo. And I remembered like what a badass you were. And, I wanted your help with keyboards and stuff like that. And I said, hey, you want to play on this song that I just wrote? And we got back we went back to the Brojo studio and we did a similar day on that song. I had the song, but like we reprogrammed it and we redid it for whatever reason. And I'll let you continue the story. You left with a cassette of the demo.
I did.
In your suitcase when you headed out to do the video in LA of Rich Man, right?
Right. So here I am in LA. I'm learning all these dance steps. I'm working with this choreographer. We had become super good friends at that point in time. And she said, I actually have a record deal. And I was like, isn't that cute? That's so cute. Really? She said, well, I'm looking for songs. I went, well, new friend of mine, and he just wrote a song, and maybe this would work for you. And I believe, help me if I'm not saying this right, but I think I just gave her the cassette. She ended up loving it.
Right.
And then she got in touch with you, or her manager or the record label got in touch with you, and you all formed this great relationship together.
Right.
And maybe you should tell them who this person ended up being, or a little bit more about that.
Oh, well, okay. So yeah, you did. You played the song for her, or handed her the cassette. I'm not sure. I had this call, and this like absolutely like caffeinated, English voice came blasting through the phone, and it was Gemma Corfield, who was running Virgin Records at the time, and that was this choreographer. The choreographer was Paula Abdul, right? And she was at that time choreographing all the like the hottest acts, and she had just come off of doing the Jacksons, Janet, ZZ Top, all that funky choreography with the furry guitars, and she signed to Virgin. And so essentially I got a call saying, from Gemma saying, like, we heard this song, we love it, who are you? What have you done? Are you a producer? And I just lied my ass off. I had never produced anything other than
I am.
Yes, I am. Yes, I produced that cassette you have in your hand,
Right.
She said, we want to fly out and meet you. If they didn't quite somehow trust, there were two things they didn't trust. Paula had a bad first experience in the studio,
right,
with LA and Babyface.
I think, yep.
We'll go into it, but it was a bad experience. It didn't help her confidence. It wasn't, and also I don't think they really fully trusted. Like they wanted, like, who is this guy? We'd never heard of him in Minnesota. So Gemma and Paula flew out, and we had a meeting. I remember Dan Brennan had arranged for me to be able to like sit with my feet up on the console at Creation Studios and look professional, because the fact is that I did a lot of the programming and stuff in my room, in my room at Summit
Avenue. Yes.
Yeah. And that was the beginning of it. And they agreed to come back once I had cut a track. I ended up recutting a track for it. And I must tell you, I've always regretted that, recutting that track. And it's a lesson learned. We all know this, but I recut the track. I don't know why, but it's going to make it better now. It's going to make the real record now, that feeling. And man, I've always loved the feel of the demo that you and I did way better.
Really?
Oh yeah.
I got to hear that.
Oh my God. Absolutely. But I mean, that's neither here nor there. And it was a hit record, and everything that came from it was great. But for me personally, the feel of that first swipe that we did at it that's the shit. Did
you ever fathom that record would do what it did?
I literally, so I ended up doing 3 songs, so that was called It's Just the Way That You Love Me. Mm-hmm. And then I wrote another one, that Forever Your Girl. And then last minute, they needed one more song for the record. And I got another sort of frantic call from Gemma, asking me if I had anything. And, I won't go into the whole story of Opposites, but it ended up being Opposites, a track. I remember it was the early days of MIDI, right? oh, and for some reason with the new MPC 60, it had some bugs, you know, and I had so much shit happening on the one, you know, because in those days everything was like bam, bam, right? So I had like horn hits and kick drums and everything was coming, chords, stabs. Everything was coming on the line. For some reason, the MPC 60 at that time was just like it couldn't handle the amount of information on the one. So it slowed down. Like, you know, at the one, it would kind of go like when it was locked to SMPTE.
Oh.
So when I went to cut the track and I cut whatever, and so it didn't, like, every time it hit the one, it was like, it would slow down, and I couldn't wrap my head around it. I was committed to it. I was I had like a week to cut the track, fly out to LA to cut the vocals. All that to say that I handed in the mix for that with an apology, you know, saying, I fucking missed the boat on this. You know, I'm sorry. Like, I tried. It was one of those, like, I just felt like I had so missed the mark on that song. And I really had a written apology. So to answer your question, did I think that this was going to like do what it did? Like, in no way, shape, or form. I didn't think I would ever get asked to write or produce a record again. I mean, I literally was like embarrassed, you know, and I managed to cover up. If you really listen to that record, Opposites, which was the biggest hit that I had, it was like it was 4 weeks at number one on both what they had, you know, R&B and pop charts at the time. But if you listen super clean, I did some things to mask like the slow down and, you know, some 16th notes through the one, whatever. But it still has a little hiccup, you know, but it didn't seem to affect the overall, obviously, impact of the record. But yeah, I had been offered to give that song The Way That You Love Me while you were out in LA doing the video. I had sent that song because I was proud of it to my old man in New York. I said, I did, you know, and I sent him this cassette. And little did I know that he had played it for Russ Titleman. Right. Great producer. Made some of my favorite records of all time, from Ricky Lee Jones to, you know, Stevie Winwood. I mean, just amazing producer. And he had played him the song, I don't know when and where, hanging out at Elaine's one night, not sure. But I had gotten a call from Russ saying, man, I heard this track, and that was our demo, and I love it, and I want to cut it on Chaka Khan. Oh. And that had happened just before the Gemma phone call, you know? I bring that up because it was an interesting choice to pick Paula over Chaka.
And Chaka was hot. She just came off of I Feel For You.
Yeah. So here's the thing, and here was the logic. And I mean, you know, once again, like I kind of, it was a counterintuitive decision, but he was asking me if I wanted to co-produce it. He wanted to use the track, the original track, that as the starting point that you and I had done, you know, and embellish it, change it, and then have Chaka sing on it. He wanted me to co-produce, and I ran it by Dan, who we've mentioned several times, you know. I said, what do you think? You know, because the second call came in for Paula, who was completely unknown. And the only thing that anybody knew about her was that she was a super trendy, up-and-coming choreographer, right? And, you know, got to give Dan Brennan credit for this advice. And he basically said, well, if you give the record to Chaka and it's a hit, everyone's going to look at it, look at the liner notes, and they're going to see, like, Chaka, right? Yes, Chaka, and they're going to see Russ Titleman. And you're going to be sort of like a little, you know, asterisk co-produced by, and the impact of that will not be the same as if you have a hit with this, you know, unknown artist, female artist over here, first record, nobody's heard of, and you're producing it. And if you have a hit, it's a game changer. And people are going to see your name, and they're going to, you know, and it will have a different impact. And I took that advice, which I lost a lot of sleep over, because you can imagine, I mean, Chaka Khan is one of my favorite all-time female singers. And I Feel For You which was Prince's song, had just been a hit. And for so many reasons, I wanted to be on that train, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't make that choice. And, you know, as I say, the rest is history. Had it been a hit for Shaka, not so much, not sure how much traction that would have given me personally, you know?
Ollie, how did that record, the success of that record, change your life? Opportunity-wise and financially?
Well, I mean, I was still gigging locally in Minneapolis when you and I met, and I was doing every gig that came down the pipe, you know, and I was rehearsing with Tamara in the Scene, you know, in the warehouse for that thing, but I was playing drum gigs with whomever, you know, Bingham McCabe and TC Jammers and Doug Maynard and like everything. I was still a working musician. I was not making much money. And, you know, I was living in a house with 5 other guys.
Right.
After I wrote that record, before it even came out, Virgin walked me over to their publishing company and offered me a deal. I mean, and I, once again, like, you know, my mentality was like, they were offering me an amount of money that was game changing. It allowed me to like not have to worry about money for a long time, and also to buy a 24-track tape machine and a console, get a house. You know, I moved in, you know, Westridge Drive near Paisley Park.
Yep.
That in and of itself was a game changer. But they gave me an amount of money that I thought, these poor fuckers, man, they really are dumb. Like, I felt like I had just gotten over, you know? Over time, they made millions on that.
Of course.
Deal. But it changed my life. My phone started ringing. A lot of other people wanted songs like the songs I wrote, and they wanted productions like the productions that I had done that you were a big part of, man. Your playing and your input and, you know, so much a part of what I was doing at that time, and so important to the sound of those records and as a sounding board. And also a lot of the time too, you know, as a fucking cheerleader for me, you know,
big time.
You know, I mean, I'm, you know, doubts all the time about the songs, about, you know, the productions, coming from where I came from and having a pretty big shadow hanging over me and pretty big shoes to fill that most young guys don't have coming into the music business. Like that kind of like, you know, it's daunting. So like a lot of questioning on myself. And back then and up until the present day, I've always been just, you know, such a champion of me and so supportive. And that sometimes that voice in the studio that I just need to hear that tells me like, dude, you're done. You're done. You know, I can't think of the amount of times you just like step away from the guitar, step away from the whatever, you're done, you know? And
we have a really good relationship that way, though. That's a trust thing that we have.
I can't remember the beginning of that sentence, but it had something to do with, I started to get a lot of calls for work.
Yes.
And you and I worked a lot because I think I called you on every single thing I pretty much ever did, whether it was to write with me on it, whether it was to play on it, you know, and we had, you know, I mean, we did a lot of stuff back then, I remember. Eventually, you know, recorded a bunch of stuff in my new studio, which was basically my living room in the house out in Eden Prairie. Till eventually, you know, I was doing the Sheena Easton record.
Yep, I remember that.
You know, one thing led to another with her, and that led to like a relationship at the time, you know, and which led to her kind of saying to me, if you're really serious about me, you know, you'll move to LA. And me being young and dumb and a little bit, you know, not thinking completely, you know, everything through, was like, I got on a plane, I bought a house here. You know, I think I did it all in the course of a day. It was the first house I looked at, literally.
I remember that.
I just bought the house we looked at. She came with me. I said, what do you think? And she said, but if you don't buy this house, you know, if you're serious about me, you know, you'll buy this house. Long story short, that's what ended up leading to me moving out here in 90, you know, that started, you know, I guess this other chapter. Yeah.
Before I let you go and do your session, Oliver, you meditate almost daily. What does that give to you? Why is that important?
Twice daily. Yeah.
Why is that so important to you?
Yeah.
Yeah.
What was the question? Sorry.
Why is that so important?
Why?
It's energy.
Yeah.
It really does.
Yeah. There's a lot going on in the world. There's a lot of
Minutia.
Yeah. There's a lot going on in my life. I'm a single dad. I have a lot of plates in the air and a lot of stresses. And I have found that by meditating, half an hour in the morning, and a half an hour in the late afternoon, early evening, really just helps to ground me, center me, kind of allow me to reconnect with what's really important, where some of the noise and the stresses and the stuff that is easy to get caught up in daily kind of falls away, and I get more perspective on what, kind of what's really important. And I find that is just, sometimes it's imperceptible, like the difference that it's making. Sometimes it doesn't feel like I had a great meditation and my mind was busy and I feel like, like, what am I accomplishing here? Right. But it has always, helped me. And, and if I start to question it, or the times I've questioned it, I ask myself, do I feel better or do I feel worse after it?
Right.
Do I feel worse? Invariably over time, I've always felt better. And I think it's made a big difference and allowed me to cope with a lot of things and stresses in my life.
Well, it's time for you to go for your workout. You're 1 minute late. Before I let you go, I just got to say to you, man, you know how much I love you. You're my brother. I cannot wait until we get to finish our song, number one.
That's on you, motherfucker.
No, you got to put a guitar solo on it. I'll sing
I do?
it.
You're like,
You do.
Oh,
yeah.
Okay.
I love you. Man, this is one of the best conversations I could ever have with one of my dearest buddies. Tony, take good care of him. Kick his ass.
I will, man.
Today.
I will. I'll hurt him extra for you today, Paul.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Ollie, I love you.
I love you, Paulie. Yeah.
Don't go anywhere. I got to end the show over on this camera.
Okay.
Episode 38 in the books with my dear buddy Oliver Leiber. Leiber?
The Leiber elf.
And that's just a perfect way to end this. I'll see you in a couple of weeks. Music on the Run was hosted by yours truly, St. Paul Peterson. Edited and produced by my buddy Davide Raso. Artist relations by Owen Sartori. Video editing by Tanner Montague. And a very special thanks to the people who financially support this podcast. And remember, old friends are the best kind of friends.
Yeah.